is mindfulness? What is Jewish meditation? And if I can make the screen a little bit bigger here for everyone to see, or for myself to be able to see what's on the big screen instead of looking backwards. Okay, can I see the big screen? I hope so. Okay, that's what I want to be able to see. So we said so far, mindful awareness and divine spirituality to help you think, feel, and live more deeply. And it's my hope that our shiur here, and all of you joining us virtually, will be living more deeply and meaningfully and purposefully based on what we've been discussing. Let's do a quick recap of a few of the ideas that we discussed, just so that we are on the same page. This week's lesson is called, Do You Mind? Yeah, we talk about mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Now, very important, I think about this idea of mind over matter. It's a basic concept that's taught in Hasidic philosophy. The idea to use our mind to control our emotions, our feelings, not to behave just instinctively and behave based on our emotions, but rather to use our mind to think. Because as we say in Shema every day, if you pay attention to the words, and part of what we're learning in this course is the idea of understanding, of kavana b'tefillah, of knowing what the meaning of our prayers are. That's part of Jewish meditation. To know the meaning of the words of our prayers. So we could say it. So one of the words we say in Shema every day, not to follow after the impulses of our hearts, what our eyes see to lead us astray. And last week, Ronnie gave us some very vivid examples of what that might be, whatever the billboards or comes up on our phones, or it might be in any direction. It could be food, and it could be spiritual, and it could be physical. How we have to have that idea of really having that mind controlling our emotions and our feelings. What's very interesting is in the Parsha this week, we read about the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And guess what, ladies? Are the ladies outnumbering the men today? No, usually the ladies outnumber the men, maybe on Zoom. And by the way, just a reminder to all you gentlemen watching, you can all join us here in person. And there's advantages of coming in person. Delicious, freshly brewed coffee, tea, please God, some refreshments, and lunch after the shir. We can't give you lunch on Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, I'm sorry. But you can get lunch if you're here with us in person. All right, so that's some of the advantages of being with us in person. Now, ladies and gents, the Torah describes the construction of the tabernacle and Mishkan. And the tabernacle, which is the Mishkan, one of the descriptions of the people, particularly of the woman, it says, Kol chachmei lev, all those who are wise-hearted. What's the definition of wise-hearted? I understand a wise mind, right? We have brilliant wisdom. But what's that? Exactly. And that's very important that wisdom is not only limited to the mind. In fact, if it's just cognitive, it can sometimes be very cold and analytical. And there's something about just using the mind that is missing part of the point. And the idea is to be wise-hearted. Not just following our heart's pursuits. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So there has to be that synthesis. By the way, when we wear tefillin, which is a mitzvah that men fulfill every morning when we pray, it's aligning our mind and our heart. Interestingly, the English word for tefillin, which probably most people don't know what it means anyhow, is phylacteries. I'm not certain what phylacteries means. It's probably Greek or Latin. Phylacteries. You could Google it. Tell me what it says in Google. No, with a PH. Yeah. But it's also the idea that I think the word phylactery is related to pardon? It's a Greek word. But to me it's like anaphylactic. It's no, not an anaphylactic. Sorry, I'm like a vaccine, a prophylactic. No, the word phylactery is like phylactic, and therefore I'm saying it's a vaccine. It is able to help you to ward off spiritual maladies, just like a vaccine helps you to ward off physical ones. So as we were going through our discussions, and I think we got a little bit deep here, we talked about the idea about how meditation is something that existed for long with our ancestors, and we talked about how our patriarchs and matriarchs they taught the world that idea of focus and understanding about belief in one God, monotheism. And then we looked at the idea that prayer is a moment of meditation from a Jewish perspective. Why and how is prayer a meditation from a Jewish perspective? Because the Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah. You might recall if you've been here for our course on prayer called With All My Heart, we discussed a lot about it. The difference between prayer and tefillah is vast. Prayer is the English word for praying, but really prayer is sort of beseeching, asking God for my needs. God is my ATM machine. God, I need money, I need health, I need this, I need that, I need the other. But tefillah comes from the word hatofel. Hatofel means to connect. So we're saying there's two meanings of the word tefillah. One is cementing. It's cementing a relationship with Hashem. And that comes from we gave the sources from the book of Shmuel, where it talks about if one commits a crime against another, he will be judged by a judge, which is telling us the idea that prayer is an introspective exercise. It's about going deep into ourselves. It's about self-judgment. And the other meaning of tefillah is also it's cementing a relationship. A person who glues earthenware vessels together. So zu gesund. So again, it could be introspective and it could be a contemplative practice. Both of those are aspects of prayer that we've discussed within that prayer presents. What other ideas did we have? I'm just doing a quick recap here. So that's what we're doing right now, is just a recap of our last. We talked about 3 categories of meditation, correct? And we said there is foreign meditation, which is something you have to steer clear from. Foreign meditation would be avodah zarah. Pardon? Yeah, it's idol worship, and unfortunately a lot of forms of meditation or yoga might have that. The other is neutral, which is where you're going to be, in the gym, or you're doing mindfulness, and that's neutral. That's not Jewish and it's not pagan. It's just meditation. And then we said there's something called Jewish meditation, which is what we're going to get into today. All right, and with that, we will begin today's discussion, and that takes us into 3 forms of Jewish meditation that are discussed in the works of Jewish thought and philosophy. One is called Hisbonenus. Why am I jumping the gun? My thing is a little bit jumpy today. Let's start with this. Hisbonenus is the first one. It's written here in the Hebrew pronunciation, or hitbodedut, sorry. And that we said is, hitbodedut is Transcendence Meditation. Okay, or what do they call it in English? TM, Transcendental Meditation. It's sort of the same idea. It's where a person secludes themselves, and in fact, but you don't have to go to the desert. You could do this at home, and you could do this in a shul. Well, I'll tell you what. The original Hasidim, and I think it's something that exists today in many Chabad shuls, they would have a Chabadske Cheder, which means a room where one can practice Hitbodedut, where one can set aside time to seclude themselves from all distractions. That means put away your phone, or luckily on Shabbos you don't have your phone because you're observing Shabbos, and you separate yourself from all other distractions. And sometimes they daven with a minyan, or just answering the prayers, or not even davening with a minyan, because you're entering a state where you're completely connecting with the Almighty, and it's a whole different experience where you feel that you're really in a much higher plane, in a much higher mode. Okay, so that's one level of meditation, and that we said is hitbodedut. The second level is called hitbonenut. That's contemplation, or contemplative meditation. Okay, that again is another level of meditation, and that can be done in the comfort of your own space. And then the third level is called kavana, which is what you would try to achieve during prayer. Sorry, we're just going to remove this from the top. Let's just get that out. What do we call it? Hide floating. Okay, can you see better? Now, this idea of meditation back here, mindfulness, it's very jumpy in my mouse, I'm sorry. Mindfulness is, this is like praying with kavana, with intention. Knowing the meaning of it's focus. Okay, again, all these levels require focus and require separating from distractions. And what we said was, over the next 6 weeks, we're going to look at all these ideas I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but we're going to try to target different aspects of Jewish meditation. And like I said, we discussed various forms of meditation, and we can broadly delineate them into these categories that we discussed. Now let's try to go and delve into some of them. Any questions before we begin today's session, today's discussions? Yes, Camille? Camilla, sorry. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, you can practice itbodedut, seclusion, even in the presence of other people, as long as you're focused. We'll go into details of that here. That's what we're doing. Yes. So Malcolm is asking, is it completely forgetting about everyone else and closing the door? But you don't have to physically necessarily close out everyone else. You are focused. As long as you're focused, you're connecting with Hashem, or you're connecting with an idea that will resonate with you and will heighten your awareness of God's presence and all the blessings that Hashem gives to you, and you're channeling those blessings into your life. That certainly can be part of it as well. It's definitely not easy, and that's why we're having a whole shiur discussing this. This is certainly not something that's easy. Yes, Ronnie?
I just want to make up what I've said in the desert, which I heard what you said can be anywhere. But the desert comes into effect from the stories of like Moses that was kicked out of Egypt, and then when he went.
We even discussed last week the idea of why our ancestors were shepherds, including Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe was a shepherd. King David was a shepherd. The patriarchs and matriarchs, their occupation was shepherds. Being a shepherd is very much conducive to having that, exactly the point you're saying, Ronnie, of being in the desert, of separating yourself from everything else.
You feel it's more connected to nature, to Hashem.
Absolutely, 100%. Okay. Now, ladies and gents, with that in mind, let's talk a little bit. Jewish meditation is primarily focusing on religious depth, but it also offers the tools to healthier living. So the point I'm making is there are going to be benefits of healthier living as well, even if that's not the focus of what I'm talking about. Because we all struggle with negative feelings and experiences. We all perhaps have times of anxiety. We all perhaps have anger issues at some times, certain triggers that might get us into certain modes that get us upset, even self-doubt. So Judaism insists that we could overcome these unwanted experiences with mach shalit al halev, with our mind controlling our emotions and our feelings. The story I told some of you last week, actually I don't think I told it to you, I told it in shul, because I only heard the story on Thursday morning. A man told me about his father his father's in the hospital. He's an elderly man. Unfortunately, due to his diabetic condition, he started to suffer with various ailments in his leg, and it was spreading, and they had to amputate part of his leg. And this man was very down and desperately depressed. He was literally in a state of despair. And the son says nothing was able to get his father into a good mood. And one day he comes to visit his father last week, and his father's in an upbeat mood. And he's wondering what happened. And at a certain point his father says, "I'm sorry, I have to go now." "So where are you going? You're in a hospital, you're a patient here, you can't go anywhere." He says, "No, I'm just going down the hall." He's wheelchair bound. But he said, "I'm going down the hall." Why? They just brought in another patient. And this patient is a younger fellow who was in a terrible motorbike accident. And the young man was very badly bruised and has given up on all hope for life, the way his current condition is. And he really was in a terrible state. And the nurse asked this old man if he would be willing to talk to the youngster and give him some hope and encouragement. So here he's coming from victimhood, the old man, and the son is telling me how it's impossible the father is just in a state of complete despair himself. And yet when he was able to give some hope to another, that's when his own state of his own condition, he is improved. And I think it's a very powerful and telling little story that is something that I've discussed many, many times with all of us here. is that when we give hope to others, we ourselves are injected with new hope. When we uplift others, even if we're feeling down, we ourselves renew our own hope. Exactly. So always, if you're feeling down, try to uplift somebody else. Try to be in a good place. They say that you are generally going to be in the mode of the 5 closest people to you. And therefore, if you're going to put them in a positive mood, it's going to be contagious, it's going to have a ripple effect, and they will also become in a positive mood. And you will all be in a positive mood. Whereas if one person's negative, the other person's negative, and we're going to have a whole toxic environment, and we don't want that. We want to have ways of really being in a joyous and a good place with each other. So for the most part, Jewish meditation is focused on enhancing our relationship with God. Remember, I said there's neutral meditation, which is more about feeling good. Jewish meditation is not about how I feel, it's about my connection with Hashem. So Jewish meditation will be about enriching and deepening my relationship with God, my engagement with the Almighty. But of course, there is that benefit still where you can have that feel-good element as well, because when you are, I'll tell you for myself, 7 days without Torah study makes 1 week. And if I don't have Torah study, no matter how much I'm achieving during the week, and trust me, it's very easy for rabbis, at least I could speak for myself, to neglect their commitments to Torah study. Why? Let me tell you, if I look at this day itself, from 5:45 this morning, of hospital visitation, of counseling, of taking phone calls, of being there for people, the day could easily fly by. So you have your shul services to do, and you have all the different responsibilities, and in my rabbinic duties, there's a lot of admin work, and there's a lot of fundraising, and there's a lot of sending out messages to people, and receipts, and being there for people, and you forget all of a sudden. There has to be time that's carved out in your day. And that's why I believe meditation is so important, because you seclude yourself. You turn off all distractions. And as much as the world needs you, you also need to connect with Hashem. And by the way, the same way you're going to carve out that time to connect with the Almighty, you have to carve out that time to connect with your family. Whether it's with your spouse or with your children, it is so important, regardless of your age and stage in life, to be able to realize those priorities. Somebody once put it to me years ago. In life, we have different bowls that we have to balance. Some bowls are rubber and they'll bounce right back. Others are glass and they will shatter and break. Our children, our family are those glass bowls. And if we lose them, God forbid, then unfortunately, we've lost the plot. And sadly, I've seen this with many other rabbis, and I could see how easy it is for myself to lose it, where we forget about, we were there for everyone else, and we forget about our own. And our own, I could start listing you a lot of important things. Unfortunately, I never ever exercise. I just don't have the time for it. But just Rabbi Haller's giving me the finger. He says, you have to find the time. It's important, because later on, God forbid, and I know already, I unfortunately suffer with gout, and it's debilitating. And if we don't find the time to look after our own health, I won't be here for you. And if I don't take care of my family, I won't be here for you. And if I don't find time for my spiritual connection with Hashem, then how could I be here for you? And I'm not just talking to me, I'm talking to you too. Hopefully it rubs off on one of us. The Juggler and the King is the book, yeah? Yeah. Certainly in life you need to find that balance. Rani is quoting the words of the great Hillel, who said, if I'm not for me, who will be? But if I'm only for myself, then ma'ani. But he starts off, if I'm not going to be there for myself, I can't be there for others. Remember, on the plane, what do they tell you? On an airplane, they always tell you, first fix the oxygen mask onto yourself, make sure you are able to breathe properly, then you can assist your infant or anyone else next to you. And the same thing as a paramedic, we were always told, you have to get to your scene safely. Sometimes people wonder, we arrive on Hatzalah calls, and people say, how are you so calm? We would think you're going to be running and anxious. You know what? If we're running and we stumble over each other, or we speed too fast to get to the emergency, then you're going to have another emergency on the way. We won't be able to treat the patient. The same thing is about our spiritual well-being and our physical well-being. In order to be there for others, we really have to take care of ourselves as well. Yes?
This is what always bothered me. Because it says, you become a lot. You only for yourself.
That's a nice another way of understanding and interpreting the Mishnah. Carmiel's saying that if I'm only for myself, ma'ani, then right, what am I? I think the Mishnah is saying, yeah, absolutely, the Mishnah is telling us that. But it starts off, if I won't be there for me, who will be? Let me tell you, I studied at 2 Jewish universities. Actually, one was called Yeshiva University, and the other one was called Touro College. Both Jewish universities in New York. In fact, Touro College recently changed its name to Touro University. I'm still not sure what the difference is between college and university. Maybe someone here could fill me in. But there is obviously a difference why they changed it from college to university. Either way, Yeshiva University is strictly Jewish. Only Jewish students can study there, and that's all. What happened was, one of the professors said, right? If we don't create a Jewish university, because don't forget there was a time a century ago when Jews were banned from participating, from being students at Harvard, at Yale, at some of the big Ivy Leagues. So they created a Jewish Ivy League. But one of the professors said, hold on, very good, we created one for ourselves. But there are other minorities who are left out of universities too. And I understand there are reasons why we need a strictly Jewish university. We want to prevent intermarriage and other, pitfalls of Jewish kids going to non-Jewish university settings where there could be all types of unfortunate situations of distractions. Probably a lot of intermarriage and assimilation happens on the university campuses because that's where Jewish kids get exposed and connected with others, and it's very sad that that could happen. But he said, if I'm only for me, then ma'ani. And therefore, this Professor Lander, I don't think he's around anymore, but I met him. He was certainly at my graduation back in 2008 or 2009 and handed me my certificate. And I have a beautiful picture of my father, Batya, and my son, Gedalia, at my graduation. I cherish that picture. And he said he had that vision. It's very good we took care of ourselves. Now we have to be there for others too. And how does Hillel conclude that phrase? V'im lo achshav, if not now, matai, then when? We have to realize the importance of every single moment. Carpe diem is our motto here. So, let me read to you a very interesting Mishnah that says, Haderech hayishara, what is the straight and narrow path for life? Himida beinanit, it is the medium path, the balance in life. Having that balance, not extreme. My mother of blessed memory used to have an expression, alt mitatzi teugnisht. You know what that means? Alt mitatzi teugnisht. All extremes are no good. Yet, everything in moderation, even moderation in moderation. You remember you saw the song on our concert event a week and a half ago. Tzi azoi, tzi azoi, tzi azoi, tzi azoi, freilach darf men sein. Tzi azoi, tzi azoi, tzi azoi, tzi azoi, freilach darf men sein. Whichever direction life pulls us, if we're pulled this way or that way, we always have to find the joys of life. So this Mishnah is telling us about the importance of living in moderation. And although I said that the focus of this course is on Torah meditation, and it's not on the neutral ideas of meditation for healthier living and mindfulness and all that, but no doubt I tell you is that if you live the Torah way, you will have that balance in life. But remember what another Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos. Imein kemach in Torah, if there's no food, you can't have Torah. Imein Torah in derech eretz. If you don't have Torah, you can't have derech eretz. Imein derech eretz in Torah. They go hand in hand. What's derech eretz? Living like a mensch. We say every morning in our prayers, La'olam yehei adam yirei shamayim baseter. It's one of our prayers. La'olam yehei adam. Now, what does it say first? Forever be a mensch. Then it says, Yirei shamayim baseter. Only then can you actually be God-fearing. If you're not a mensch, you're not God-fearing. Okay? It's impossible to be God-fearing if you're not a mensch. And I'll quote another Mishnah to you and give you the interpretation of Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi the Alter Rebbe. It was in the Hayom Yom thought from 2-3 days ago. Hayom Yom is a little compilation. I love sharing the insights every day. I haven't read today's yet. If you want, I can pull it out in a moment. But the Hayom Yom we read just 3 days ago said as follows. It says in the Mishnah and Tractate Brachos, Daf Vav Amud Beis, it says as follows. La'olam yehei adam zahir b'tfilat mincha. A person should always be careful in the prayer of mincha. Why mincha? Well, mincha, the Mishnah goes on to tell us, is smack in the middle of the day. Right? And during the day, it's harder to focus on your prayers. Now, shacharit, which is the morning prayer, you can always do it in the morning. Go to shul in the morning before you go to work. If you can't make it to shul, you at least put on your tefillin and say your prayers in the morning. Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, same thing. You get home at night, you might go to the gym, you might have to eat supper, you might have a meeting, you might have a shir, but you have all night to pray the evening service. And therefore, it's not so difficult. But mincha is the afternoon prayer. Mincha has to be said from midday till sunset. And it's sometimes, especially if you look at winter months, and not so hard over here in South Africa, because the truth is, our minyan in Santon Central at our shul is always, the earliest it gets to is 5:15. It's when people finish their day. In fact, I have some people that only come in the winter, because in the summer they're saying, I finished work 5 o'clock, I could get back home to Glen Hazel and have a minyan in Glen Hazel's side and be with my family. But in the winter they want to come to me for the minyan because they finish at 5 o'clock and they're not going to make it with traffic. Pre-COVID days, today there's still not so much traffic, back to Glen Hazel to be on time for their mincha, so they'll come to us, to our shul. But the Mishnah says mincha sometimes happens to be the hardest. Now, I spent a year in London. In the winter in London, it gets dark by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock is not the time people are going home from work. In New York, same thing. It's getting dark at 3:30. So, the same idea. But let me give you another interpretation, the way Chassidus explains this line. The literal translation of La'olam Yehi Adam Zahir means a person should always be careful. But let me ask you, besides from meaning forever or always, what else does La'olam mean? To the world. Yehi Adam. A person should be Zahir, besides from meaning careful, as many words in Hebrew have multiple meanings. What else does Zahir mean? Besides for careful. Zohar means to shine. Zahir means you should be a shining light. So this is the Hasidic interpretation of this Mishnah. La'olam yehi adam zahir, a person should always be a shining light to your surroundings. Right? Isn't that our mission, to be a light unto the nations? We have to always be a shining light wherever we are. And it's very easy to get dragged down and to sometimes be pulled into the mud and the quagmire of all types of situations and faribbles and what do we call it? Controversies, as they like to say. Which way do you say there? Controversy or controversy? Controversy. I'm American, I say controversy. Yes. With TV, thank God people here have a little bit more of understanding of the American language than the Americans have. So the point I'm making is, the Torah meditations are certainly an important stepping stone to feeling. It teaches us fundamental principles like being. Sorry guys, we have another shir going on. So like being in control of our thoughts, our thoughts having an impact on our minds. Okay, and as they say, be careful with your thoughts, because be careful with your feelings, your heart, because your feelings will impact your thoughts. Stephen, if you don't mind, we have a shir going on here. Apologies. Be careful with your feelings, because they could lead to your thoughts, and your thoughts could lead to your actions, and your actions could lead to, so I might be messing up the order, but the point is, we certainly have to be careful with these things, and that we have to realize that that's all part of the Torah perspective of meditation that I'm sharing with you. Now, one of the most common reasons people search for meditation today is to reduce the negative experiences or stress. Okay, remember that stress is a very common thing we get these days. I mean, a lot of people are stressed out. What do I tell everyone? Remember, if you are stressed, have some dessert. Stressed backwards is dessert. So just reverse it with some extra dessert. Okay, certainly stress is one of those issues that people have to deal with. In fact, there's a study led by some kind of psychological study that's talking about how many people who practice meditation began to meditate in order to reduce their negative experiences, which is very, very common. So we certainly can have that benefit, right? We all want to be happier, but inevitably, unfortunately, just the way life is, life throws things at us, right? Or around us, perhaps, that trigger us in unwanted ways. And it creates negative emotions. It can sour our moods. So think about people dealing with their anger, with hurt, with anxiety, worry. I mean, I'm one of those people always worrying about things. Well, right? We got to work on that. That's perhaps part of what we want to do. Do you ever get frustrated? What type of frustrations that are difficult to handle? Do you ever have self-doubt? There's so many unwanted feelings that we might have. And these often weigh us down and have a negative impact on our lives. So today, for the coming days, we're going to focus on exploring the foundational underpinnings of Jewish meditation and how they can be harnessed as a tool to overcoming the negative emotions. And even more than that, to, more importantly, cultivate positivity. Not COVID positivity, but positivity in our lives. And as I asked you last week to think of a negative experience that you may have had recently, maybe in the past week or the past month. Does it stand out? Right? You can think about those situations, okay, the negative feelings that a person may have had, and think about ways that it affected you when you have negative feelings. Maybe it was an electrocution or a lightning strike, or nobody relating to what I'm talking about. Maybe it was whatever. You can think about your own load shedding, right? If we talk about la'olam yahei adam zahir, that a person should always be, right, to the world a shining light, as we re-quoted the Mishnah, changed its meaning. But unfortunately, we ourselves could have some personal load shedding inside, different things that prevent us from being that shining light. And if there was something that impacted our emotional well-being, or perhaps strained our relationships, or had a negative effect on our productivity, or think of any other examples, right? Maybe psychological or physiological changes in our bodies. It happens. How do we deal with it? Right? Many of us perhaps struggle with these things. And did you have a hard time identifying some challenge in the past month? Was there more than one? Was there a dozen? So while some negative experiences aren't overwhelming, they just come and go, but they're always unwanted. You don't want these things, right? They're unwelcome. Unwelcome visitors. You remember my unwelcome visitor story? A friend of mine said it was a counseling session, a mediation session that I had to get involved with, where someone from Joburg was going to New York. I got to say, homes in New York is not as spacious as homes in Johannesburg. And this family was going to spend a Shabbos, a weekend in Crown Heights. Okay, it's a little bit of a smaller, people homes there are a little smaller. When they open up your home to you, you're getting a little room, everything you could hear, and it's just a different experience, but it's a wonderful experience being in Crown Heights. Anyways, this lady was invited to go to Crown Heights for a conference, for a weekend. And when she arrived, you can imagine, she arrived in JFK, weary, tired, exhausted from her flight, gets into a taxi, finally gets to the home in Crown Heights. The hostess opens the door, she's on the phone, she's talking to somebody. In the meantime, she shows her in, go into the room. While she's talking on the phone, she says to the person on the other end, "Yeah, I also have unwanted visitors in my home." You can imagine how this guest felt, and without even saying anything, she left the house. "I'm unwanted visitor, I'm out of here." The hostess, in the meantime, felt very, insulted. This person leaves my house, no note, no nothing, not even a message. I don't understand what's going on. Eventually, somebody found this guest in shul on Shabbos. Luckily, she came to shul. And so what happened? The hostess is very hurt and insulted by you. What kind of behavior is this? The South Africans are supposed to be nice people. You just left the host's home without even saying a word. How could you do such a thing? So do you know what she said about me? She said on the phone, I heard her telling somebody, unwanted guest. If I'm unwanted, I'm not going to stay there. I'd rather book a hotel room. I'll stay where I am wanted. I'm going to say, no, I can't believe she would speak that way about you. All right, mediation back forth, and it turns out as follows. The hostess was on the phone with, her friend or relative. All right, she welcomed the guest. In the meantime, she just couldn't get off the phone. She's on the phone, so she just showed her to her room. I'll be with you in a moment. In the meantime, she's talking on the phone, and she said, I have unwanted visitors, unwanted guests. She was referring to rodents, to mice. She needs the exterminator to get rid of them, right? But you know how it was implied, how it was understood by the person who was in the house. And sometimes we could get into these situations where we're not sure what what the impact is. Of course, we have all these unwanted elements in our lives. And those elements have a real effect on our mood and our capacity to function. We have to be careful, though, with how we express it. Because many people struggle with various feelings. Sometimes it's like this recurring feelings. It's a never-ending cycle. Try as we might, we sometimes can't seem to escape that rabbit hole of negative thought, of negative behavior patterns. What do we say in the rat race of life? Even if you win the race, you're still a rat. You don't want to be in that situation, in that just never-ending vicious cycle, that pattern that inevitably just has a negative effect on us. It's not a good place to be in. So besides for the spiritual benefits of Jewish meditation, there are practical benefits as well. Yes, you could go to the gym and go to a health center and spa and maybe have nice calming music. And by the way, as I showed you all, there's plenty of good Hasidic music that is also very calming and has all those benefits. Jewish meditation, which includes music, and you'll see some of it, probably more so tomorrow, but it can help us with dealing with those negative feelings that weigh us down, with those situations. And the good news is that the struggle is not inevitable as much as we think it might be. We can win over our emotions, as I've been telling you. Just as that man last week, the elderly man who all of a sudden was coming from victim to being the one helping someone else. We're not hostages to our feelings. And as human beings, we have the innate power to overcome those unwanted feelings. Yep. Well, when we're in the rut, when we're in the situation, it's always overwhelming. It's like a magnifying glass and everything in the situation feels completely blown up out of proportion. That's why we oftentimes have to deal with the situation and learn. And that's why when we're going to learn these ideas from Torah, I think it will give us, this is not negating medical. And by the way, I always tell people, if a person has a chronic condition, if they have a medical condition, if they have a psychological condition, they have to see a doctor. Don't blame it on Torah. See a doctor. The other day I got a phone call about, unfortunately a couple dealing with the situation. They want me to get involved. I asked them, I said, please do me a favor. Tell me, do you have a therapist who's helping you out? I'm not a qualified therapist, and there's many counseling classes I've taken. First of all, experience for me is a lot more than the classes and sessions I've taken. I've taken many classes on counseling, but I'm not qualified. I'm not a therapist. I could try to help as best as I can, and if I could be of a support to the two of you, I will be the best support I can be. But I don't substitute a counselor, a therapist. People call me late at night for help. You know why? Because they don't get a bill from me. Try calling your lawyer late at night, see what kind of bill you get. People think the rabbi's available 24/7. Is the lawyer available the same 24/7? So we discussed how the Torah tells soldiers going to war. I already read this to you last week, that the Torah tells I just want to read this verse to you. It's very important. The Torah tells soldiers who are going out to war. What does it say? Yes, it's in the parsha related to Ki Tetzei Lamilchama, but it says that the Kohen HaMashiach, there was a special, one of the Kohanim, it was his job to, what's it called in English? There's a name for it, where there's a person who has this, he's like a chaplain. There's certainly, I believe that, I don't know if Ukraine or Russia or which one, probably both militaries having it at the moment, where you're telling your soldiers, you're giving them the battle cry. You're telling them to be encouraged and chizuk, giving them encouragement. There must be a term, even I'm sure currently in the Israeli army. Pardon? What's the term in English? Encouragement. But what's the person who gives that encouragement? In Hebrew, in the Torah, is called the Kohen HaMashiach. The Kohen. Okay, he says to them, he says, the verse in the Torah, it says, when you are approaching a war or battle, then the Kohen, who is designated to this task, comes near to the people, to the soldiers, and he speaks to them. And what does he say? He says, Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. Atem krevim hayom lamilchama al ovechem. Today you are approaching the battle against your enemies. Al yerach levavechem. Do not allow your heart to be discouraged. Don't fear. Al tiru. Do not be afraid. V'al tachpezu, and do not be alarmed. V'al tartzu mipneihem, and do not be terrified because of them. And as we know, the Torah rules that if there's a soldier who's petrified, who's scared, and it's going to cause chaos and havoc and fear amongst his fellow soldiers, he has to get a dismissal, a discharge from the army. We can't afford to have that. Absolutely, it could have a detrimental effect on the rest of the soldiers. So of course there's plenty of reasons why a soldier going to war, going to battle is going to be afraid. He's certainly facing bloodshed. He's certainly facing all the fears that you're going to have. But he is told on the way to war, the spiritual chaplain, the Kohen is telling the army, the soldiers, he's instructing them not to be afraid. The soldiers weren't encouraged to march on despite their fears. I know you're afraid, but listen, we need you. It's not what they're told. They are commanded not to fear at all. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. Anyone know who composed these words? Very famous song composed by a very renowned rabbi. I think he actually passed away very young. He was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he's buried in Uman in Ukraine. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov composed these very famous words. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar meod, gesher tzar meod. The whole wide world is a narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. But the main thing of all is not to worry. Don't worry at all. But the main thing of all is not to worry at all. That's what the Kohen said to the Jews before they went out to their wars, to their battles. He didn't say, I know you're afraid, but overcome your fears. He actually said, don't be worried. Torah expects that we can have mastery over our seemingly natural fears and feelings. Yes, even fears that are caused by real, genuine danger. It's war, it's battle. Surely we can control feelings that are born out of much lesser aggressions and perceived problems. Shouldn't we be able to? Oh, so from the deeper perspective of Judaism, the idea is you absolutely have the power to overcome your inner emotional adversaries. The question is, how do we do it? How do you do it? Okay, so I would actually like to take this opportunity and ask you ways to how it practically works for you, and then I'll get into some of these ideas. So just hearing from Rosalind here, Rosalind says, let go and let God. Yeah, and you know what? I heard from somebody yesterday. He said one day he was looking at the word good, and it has God in it, and his mother told him the word good also spells go do. Do your part, Hashem will help out. Certainly. A lot of toxicity. Got to get rid of the negativity. Absolutely. Yes. Carmela.
How do you get rid of
Okay, we're going to discuss that particularly in the context of the Purim story, which is coming up. So next week, please God, we'll talk more about that, because Al tira mipachat pitom is the words we say at the end of davening every day. Al tira mipachat pitom mishoat rishayim kitavo. Mordechai Hatzadik said these words to the young children as he gathered them when Haman, the wicked Haman, was threatening annihilation of the entire Jewish people, extermination. The original solution to the Jewish problem that Hitler said, Haman said the same thing, I'll get rid of all these Jews, and thank God we're still around. But it's a good question you're asking. How do we deal with it if the fear seems real? Certainly not easy. We'll get to it. Good point. Any other questions? Anyone on Zoom or Facebook has questions? Let me just see, there's some comments popping up here. Just tell us if you have particular tools or anything that you find a meaningful way that personally helps you in overcoming negative emotions or feelings. Okay. Every answer can be correct. Don't feel... Okay, let me just see what this message says. Okay. What's that? Look, there's certainly an expression in the Gemara that says that when you have an issue, yasichena, you should discuss it with others, and there's tremendous benefit to that, just having a sounding board, somebody to talk it to, because you could always work through your problems when you're able to discuss it. But sometimes you'll talk out your own solution, and nobody can have a solution better than you. But just having the opportunity to discuss it with somebody could already have that benefit. Yes, the benefit of having a mashpia, of having a mentor, of somebody you could talk to, who could guide you, and certainly from a spiritual perspective. The Mishnah says, Aseh l'charav, every person should have a teacher, and I think it's very important. Today is Chaf Zayin Adar, the 27th of Adar Rishon, exactly 30 years ago today, and I remember it distinctly. I was a 10-year-old boy, and I remember the Rebbe suffered a debilitating stroke on this day 30 years ago. And what was the Rebbe's the Rebbe's cry that he beseeched and begged all of his Hasidim prior to this incident of experiencing that stroke that robbed him of his faculty of speech ever since, and his passing 2.5 years later? The Rebbe encouraged everyone to follow the teaching of the Mishnah, Aseh lecha rav, that everyone should have a mentor. It's not easy to have a mentor, though, because you need to find somebody with whom you have mutual respect, somebody who you feel you have a sprach, somebody you can talk to, who understands you and you understand them. That person is not going to treat you like dirt. Unfortunately, I find, sometimes you talk to certain people. It could be a rabbi, it could be a rebbitzin, it could be anybody who, sees you as inferior, or perhaps responds derogatorily to you, or perhaps is off-putting in those ways, and then you don't feel like sharing your thoughts with them. You need to have the right type of person you can talk with, who you connect with in the right way. For whatever reason, if you don't connecting, if there's no, I don't know what to call it, chemistry or what, then that's not your mashpia, that's not the right person, that's not your mentor. Right? If they don't talk to you in a respectful way, then that's not the right person to have. You need to have a person at the same time who you will listen to. I don't think this could be a selective thing. You're my mentor for this and you're my mentor for that, and I'm shopping around for answers who I could talk to. Right? So just a second. Ethne, you could join the shir now. We're just in the middle of a shir. You'll have to... Ethne, we'll have to call you back later, or you could call me in an hour. We're just in the middle of the shir. Or you could just listen in. Okay, so the point I'm making is that the people that they're having a mashpia, thank you for that, Rosalind, that's a very important point. Yes? Let's see how many we are here. How many men? 3, 4, 6, 8. If you can bring 2 more men down from upstairs, we're Rabbi Mesinter or Shlomo. There's 10 men here. No, not now. At 11:30. The shir will finish in 20 minutes. You could tell them, sure. Yeah.
You're asking what tools somebody.
Yeah, what personal tools, and then I'll be happy to.
I'm speaking for myself. From the first blessing, the first thing that we say in the morning, that's in there. It's almost everything. The fact that we install the soul waking us.
Right. From the very moment of saying Modani, of giving gratitude and thanks to God for restoring us. Absolutely.
And then, of course, the other thing, if you go to you receive upon yourself in the Kabbalah, like it's about a session, but after you're already there to eliminate any negative thoughts, etc.
So Ronnie's saying, taking upon yourself that positivity, that you're going to be in the right mode, you're going to be grateful, you're going to have an acknowledgement of God's provision, providing you for all your needs, and being grateful for it. Okay. That faith in God. And Rosalind's adding the idea when you're saying Shema. The fact is that you say Shema in the morning and the evening, realizing that the morning, the sunshine in your life is a blessing and gift of God. And likewise, realizing that even at night, in the darkness of our life, we put our hands and our faith, our trust in Hashem. So, can I go a little bit psychological for now? Psychological studies have proven the power of the mind to regulate emotions that decrease stress and negative feelings. So that mindful awareness and meditative practice that a person has when you're able to focus, as Malcolm was saying before, that's improved people's emotional well-being and their mental health, that even for healthy people, you don't have to be sick to benefit from mindfulness. Even a healthy person can be in a clearer space by doing these things, right? And all the more so for people who have emotional disorders or PTSD, which is unfortunately, there's been a lot of PTSD post-COVID, or people have experienced incidents. And sadly, in this country, there's a lot of crime that that people deal with, and having that mindfulness certainly can be beneficial. Now, more than that, somebody sent me a note that neurobiological studies indicate that mental training may affect the brain's flexibility and improve attention control and self-awareness, particularly as it comes to aging, as people get older. These are benefits that we all need. Today, proven mind-based therapies treat a host of emotional disorders and even psychological pain control. So I want to just share with you something that I saw. It's in my book, so you have to give me a minute to find it. Let me just find it here. Okay, I can't show it to you per se, but I'll just share with you some interesting studies that I found here. And they said that the mind possesses tremendous power, capable of controlling and regulating so much of our lives. Indeed, many therapies have been developed on this basic premise. Your mind can regulate your emotions. Did I not tell you before? A basic premise of Chassidus is Mach Shalit Alalev, that the mind can control your emotion. Not can, it must. So there's various techniques, and I'm not going to go through all of them here, but just a few of them that you might be familiar with. Okay, one of the most famous is MBI, mindfulness-based interventions. You heard of that? MBIs? Okay, so just to share with you a few of these main conditions with evidence support for MBI. There's one called MBSR, which is stress, burnout, health, chronic pain. A lot of people suffer from burnout. That's one of the benefits of Shabbos, right? You might have burnout from work or for other things, and the benefit of Shabbos is switching off, exactly. Okay, another one they talk about is Nbct, manic depressive disorder. Okay, they talk about relapse prevention and acute treatment. People have bipolar disorders, or MBRP, substance use disorders, which there's relapse prevention for, or what's called ACT, chronic pain, anxiety, and depressive disorders. And there's DBT, borderline personality disorder, substance use disorder. Again, I would recommend that anyone who's going through any of these should be seeking real medical attention, not necessarily coming to a rabbi for it. But certainly, although these are psychological issues, and I'm not going to go, here it tells you all about each of these, which we won't do right now, unless you want me to. You want me to explain each of these? I'll give you a short synopsis. Okay, MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. an intensive training regimen focused on developing mindfulness techniques, originally developed in the late 1970s by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. The training includes formal meditation techniques such as sitting meditation, as well as informal meditation techniques such as mindfulness while eating or conducting routine activities. The goal of this training is for participants to cultivate a stable and non-reactive present moment awareness. Okay. When it comes to Nbct, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, anyone familiar with this? What's that? No? Okay. So this is developed in the 1990s by a group of research psychologists to target depression. This approach combines MBSR with cognitive behavioral therapy, a form of therapy that attempts to adjust maladaptive patterns of thought and behavior. Like MBSR, this therapy usually consists of intensive training in formal and informal meditation techniques, but also includes training for identifying and diffusing negative patterns of thought. So basically what they're showing you here is the variety of meditative techniques that can help people in various chronic conditions, and these can be very helpful. Okay, yeah, I'm sure many of them do require medication, but they're talking here about the meditative elements. Some other ones. This one's MBRP, which is mindfulness-based relapse prevention. It's designed to prevent relapse in patients recovering from addictive behaviors. This program was engineered by a group of addiction specialists in the early 2000s. Like MBCT, it combines mindfulness with cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, training participants in both. Together, these techniques help individuals identify their personal triggers for addictive behavior, notice when they have become triggered, and respond to addictive triggering in adaptive ways. Yeah, like alcoholic, there's all types of addictions that people deal with. As we get closer to Pesach, we'll talk about the ideas of breaking free from habits and addictions. This one, ACT, A-C-T, is acceptance and commitment therapy. This therapy uses a combination of mindfulness and psychotherapy techniques to help participants accept potentially painful psychological experiences. The aim is to thereby enhance the patient's psychological flexibility, the ability to fully engage the present moment and act on it in accordance with one's chosen values. And the last one I'm reading to you here is DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. Originally developed in the early 1990s by Dr. Marsha Linehan for treating borderline personality disorder, this therapy has since been expanded to treat a wide range of psychopathologies, including eating disorders, mood disorders, substance abuse disorders, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The core of its therapy is mindfulness training, which is then used as a foundation for teaching skills in maintaining healthy relationships, effectively controlling one's emotions, and coping with psychological distress. Therapy typically lasts for approximately 6 months. Okay, so it goes on here about these various therapies. It's interesting, but notice how in each of them there is a meditative element that could be extremely beneficial. Okay, in our remaining 10 minutes of today. Yeah, it is scary that there are so many, but at least there are tools and benefits of ways to deal with these things. What did you want to say, Malcolm? Yes, certainly people need ways to fill their lives meaningfully with purpose, and that's certainly a concern that many people have. I'm even dealing with Pesach retreat, and I could see that we get people online complaining. I'm on these forums and groups, and I saw somebody kvetching that it's unfair that most of these Pesach retreats are focused on families, and this person happens to be an older, single individual, and he's upset that there's no programs for people like him. And I say, come join us. Nothing's stopping you, preventing you from joining us as well. But I say to each of us, and I know that people who are here both virtually and in person who've told me that coming to these shiurim give you meaning and purpose and a reason to get up in the mornings. And it's certainly worthwhile to encourage yourself to realize that the benefits of coming to a shir, besides for the lunch and the refreshments that are here for you to enjoy. That's another very important point, is that you have a vast experience, especially as senior citizens. You have vast experience in so many areas. And I recall the old days. I see BCE, before the COVID era, when we used to have our iPad training. We would get high school students in here giving the seniors a chance to learn how to use technology. And in return, I remember some of the Chabad Senior Club members doing homework and teaching the kids. And I think it's a two-way street, and I'm looking forward to actually re-initiating that program. And we could get that going right away. There's no reason why not. Okay, somebody here sent me something very cute related to what we're talking about. It's a joke. He says, Abe is talking to his friend. If there's one piece of advice I can give you, Mervyn, it's this. I read it in the Times yesterday. The Sunday Times comes out yesterday, right? He says, and it worked immediately for me. You know what it is? I finally found that inner peace. I'm sure it will work for you too, Abe says to Mervyn. No, what's the advice, Mervyn asks? Give me this advice already. You want to hear what he said? Okay, here it is. The way to achieve inner peace is to finish all things you've started. Really, Mervyn asks. Yeah, really? This is how it goes. I looked around to see all the things that I started, but I hadn't finished. So I finished one bottle of white wine that I left open from Shabbos, and a keg of beer that they didn't finish at the bracha. Oh, and there was a bottle of whiskey that they left on the side there. Oh, and you haven't seen the box of chocolates. I'm telling you, you have no idea how good it feels. Of course. All right, so ladies and gents, just to summarize and to try to really get to the points that we tried to get to today. And yeah, for 10 more minutes we could focus on a few more points. There are, of course, many helpful and good tools out there, but we want to learn the Torah's tools, right? That will help you to deal with these vicious cycles, the challenges that we have. You know, in fact, my doctor suggested that I try yoga to reduce stress. I told her it sounded like a stretch. Okay, but just before we get into it, we want to understand what is our function as human beings. We're Homo sapiens. What are we here for? Why did God put us in this world? And once we have a good understanding of the flow of our consciousness, we'll be able to better appreciate what the process of meditation does and how we could use it and how it could benefit us. And let me just see if we have enough time to try to do. Let's try. Let's see how far we could go. Okay, before we get into it, very important point. Key to appreciating the mindfulness practice that we discuss is the awareness of the spiritual technology that makes us tick. The mechanism that I'm talking about is, we could only truly understand it by taking a peek beneath the hood of our souls. And we try to understand what is the makeup, what is the anatomy of a soul. Human souls are equipped with intellect, with our cognition, right? With intellect. First goes intellect, and then goes emotion. You have to remember that. Moach, our mind, is shalit al alev, has to control our feelings, our heart. And therefore, if the intellect, if the brain, if the mind comes first, and the emotion, the heart, the feelings come second, then we therefore process experiences exactly in that order. It is our cognitive judgment that triggers our emotions. And this soul process operates on the platform of the three soul garments that we discussed in previous year. Anyone remember what are those three distinct modes of active consciousness that the soul dons and doffs? You know what I'm talking about? During COVID, we had to put on our hazmat suits whenever going to emergencies. It was called donning and duffing. Well, guess what? Our soul also has 3 garments, 3 layers with which we interact, 3 modes of our active consciousness. And that's what helps us process and interact with entities and experiences beyond ourselves in this world. What are these 3? Even though we discussed them before, I have to remind you that according to Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, every human soul is comprised of 10 unique attributes or functions. Are you familiar with these? They're called Eser Koiches HaNefesh, the 10 faculties of the soul. And through these capacities, we explore the world around us, we interact with it. What are these 10 capacities? Let me put them on the board for you here. Can you see them? They are, starting on the right, we have Chachma, we have Bina, we have Dat. That is the 3 cognitive ones. Chachma is called wisdom, Bina is understanding, Dat is knowledge. We'll get into it, we'll dissect it, we'll understand it. I'm not giving it to you all on one foot. We'll have to spend a little bit more time on this tomorrow, please God. The next set are these 7 emotions. And that is chesed, which is kindness and love. And then goes gevura. Gevura is restraint, fear, discipline. And the balance of the 2, which is called tiferet. That's why it's also known as harmony. Tiferet is also beauty. It's the beauty of synthesizing the 2. That is compassion. Compassion is the combination of love and kindness on one side and discipline, restraint on the other side. And then the later ones, which are less familiar, maybe we'll spend a little time discussing them tomorrow, is Netzach, which literally means victory, or it's that ambitious state that we have. It's our drive to get things done. And conversely, on the other side of it is Hod, which is humility, also known as splendor. And then beneath it you have Yesod. Yesod is the connection. It is the combination, the synthesis of Netzach and Hod, of that ambition and at the same time humility. You need to have both. As we said, we need to have the moderation, the combination of the 2. Just as if a person is only kind and loving, it is not healthy. There always has to be certain borders, certain lines, certain limitations. And a very strict, stringent disciplinarian is not going to succeed either. There has to be the combination of both. That's tiferet, the harmony, the compassion. The same thing if a person's only ambitious without humility, there's a lack. That's yesod, that's the connection, the foundation of the 2. And finally comes malchut, which is literally, malchut means royalty, but that's more of receptiveness. Okay, that's about grounding it. Implementation, which cognitively is the idea of dat. Now I know this might sound a little bit like jargon. That's why I encourage everyone to not disappear so quick. We have to gain a little understanding of it. We only have a few minutes left for today. So please God, tomorrow we're going to return back to this list. But just to give us the basic idea, the functions, these 10 Eser Koiches HaNefesh, these 10 faculties, these 10 divine attributes that each of us have are broadly divided, as we see in this list, into 2 categories. As I said, there is the category of intellect, cognitive, and we have the category of the heart, of our emotions. So the first 3 of these powers relate to the mental and cognitive life, and the next 7 to our emotional state, our emotional response capacity. Okay, if you look at the original Hebrew, these are referred to as seichel and midot. What's seichel? Intelligence. And midot is emotions. Everyone with me here? Even the virtual people. Okay, this is where we start getting a little complex. That's why we need a bissel mind application. That's why we're about to serve lunch. Okay, 3 minutes left on my clock on top here. Our intellectual powers are what we generally refer to as our mind. It is the part of us that thinks and processes things rationally. What makes sense? Right? We use these powers to collect data, to analyze, to judge, to make determinations based on the information that we have. This is our capacity to think objectively, to understand ideas, and to problem solve. Seichel. Yes? Then comes midos. What's midos? Our emotional powers are what we often call our heart. It's the capacity we have to have subjective feelings towards things. Whether positive feelings or it could be negative feelings. The fact is that we have both of these and we employ them to love or to hate. Right? We get excited and passionate and into things, or to get angry. It goes in both ways. To feel happy or to be sad. That's all the heart. That's the emotions. And they are part of us. That's the part of us that Chassidus, that Kabbalah tells us, that makes us drawn to certain things and repulsed by others. It's the chesed, it's the again, seichel and midos. Got it? 2 key words. Seichel is our intellect, midos is our emotions. Now, my friends, if you want to get to the root of emotions, and tomorrow we'll talk about the 3 garments of the soul. What are the 3 garments? Remind yourselves again. Machshava, dibur, maisa. Thought, speech, and action. So let me share with you a few words from Tanya for today before we conclude. Says the Alter Rebbe in chapter 3 of Tanya, he tells us, Kach benefesh ha'adam, the human soul is divided into these 2 categories, seichel and midos, intelligence and emotion. Chachma bina das, our intellectual faculties, chachma, wisdom. Bina, understanding. Das, knowledge. Das is that implementation, where you're going to put it into action. What has it got to do? And that is referred to as the imais, umakar lamidas, that is the mother and the source of the emotions. Ki amidas hein toldas chachma bedas, because the emotions are the offspring of the intelligence. Our minds might develop an idea, and then you understand it more, right? Wisdom, knowledge, and you're going to judge a situation. But it's the heart that naturally follows close behind, leading us to feel a certain way to respond. Right? For example, when we understand the dangers of a certain behavior, our mind judges it, right? Our mind tells us, don't go next to the fire. It's dangerous. We become afraid. So it's our mind that's telling us not to touch the flame. When we develop an understanding of how beneficial something might be to us, right? We like it. We want it. So it's our mind that gets us, our hearts, excited. We size up the situation, right? If somebody's done something wrong to us and we're offended and we're insulted, we feel hurt or angry. Our mind tells us that person did something wrong. But it's our heart, it's our emotion that is going to get excited about it. Ladies and gents, it's 11:30. Time for the shir to conclude. We are going to finish with a Mishnah and a Kaddish D'Rabbanan and a Birchat HaGomel. And then you could all enjoy some delicious refreshments sponsored by Bracha. Thank you all for joining us here virtually. Please join us again tomorrow. When the mind understands, the emotions follow. So please understand that right here at the shir, we are offering you every day to come join us and have delicious food to eat and food for your mind to enjoy. Zakazan to everyone. We got some more questions in the chat box. Let's quickly open it. Thank you. Mervyn, please come in person, and the rest of you as well. Please do join us. You're most welcome here at Chabad House every morning. For now, it's Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, 10 a.m. till 11:30 a.m. Starting on Mondays next week, we're going to have 9 to 10 OT.